The first step of awakening is admitting to yourself you have been conditioned to be a slave. A slave of what society, religion, and the media tells you to look like, think, behave, believe, eat, live, etc. Only then can the spiritual healing begin as a sovereign being with infinite possibilities. In spirituality, we discuss the difference between the spiritual self and the personality self. And the personality self is developed on many different levels. It is developed through external sources such as our family, our friends, the media, the newspaper, the magazines, TV. All of these external influences are constantly bombarding you as you are developing into your ego self. Now the ego self, while it is a necessary part of living in this 3D dimension type of reality, it is not who you are. Who you truly are is a spiritual free being. However, as spiritual beings living in this 3D reality, we seem to feel that we are locked into who we think we are versus who we truly are. And that is why we speak about letting go and admitting to ourselves, admitting that the ego is a slave for you. It is a slave for your personality. You are a slave to it because it is a slave to the external influences, such as worrying about what your neighbors think about you, such as worrying about what everyone in church thinks about what you're wearing, or at the temple or the synagogue, wherever you may go. Being concerned about what other people think about you, being concerned that you are not staying with the current times, with the current fashion, with the current music, that you don't have the best car, that you don't have the best job, that you don't have the best life, that you aren't keeping up with the Joneses, for lack of a better term, is one of the forms of slavery that is imparted to you through this ego sense mentality that I'm speaking of. So in order for us to really begin the spiritual path, and this is just putting our first foot onto the spiritual path, we need to acknowledge the fact that we are conditioned by the external influences and that we have been a slave to it our entire lives until we have come to this place of awakening. Now that we have come to this place of awakening, we can start looking at the characteristics of the ego self and how the ego is influenced so subtly. Remember, we talk a lot about subtle energy fields and subtle energies that are around us, such as like chi or any kind of influence as far as electromagnetic influence, vibrational influence, and they're all working very subtly. And in order for us to be able to go inward, we need to learn to recognize these subtle energies and how they affect us, especially our ego self, and how the ego self really does affect the spiritual self. So what I'm trying to say here is that as you are stepping your foot onto this path of spirituality, as you are moving toward, let's say, taking your life back, as this series is called, we want you to be able to recognize the fact and not be afraid and not be offended by the fact that you are a slave to your ego, that you have been a slave to society, that you have been a slave to this certain false illusory paradigm that you have been thrust into in this incarnation or in this life. Here we are on planet Earth. This is one paradigm only out of, bazillions of planets and whatnot throughout our universe. But in this planet, on this earth, within this society, within your world, no matter where you live on this earth, you have a certain paradigm that you have been living up to, that you've had to meet the needs or standards of, whether it be your families, whether it be your partner, whether it be your job, whether it be the magazines on the magazine stand, or the TV commercials on television telling you to buy a certain product or you'll never make it anywhere, you'll never be successful. You've even had a different way of looking at success than what is really real. Success is not measured in dollars. Success is not measured in the nice home. Success is not measured in what you have. Success is measured in who you are. And that is begun, and we begin this process by really becoming honest with ourselves, becoming very, very honest with ourselves and saying, okay, I am a slave to this paradigm. I have allowed myself to think I'm this thing, this person, this personality that needs to look a certain way, that needs to act a certain way, that has to have a certain amount of money in the bank, that has to drive a certain car, or whatever, wear a certain headdress if you're living in a village. I mean, whatever it may be. This is not reality. And you need to become brave enough and say, I have been a slave. And that is step one. Admitting there's a problem, not to borrow from other recovery type of programs, but admitting there's a problem. And that problem is that you're a slave to your ego. And your ego has been influenced your entire life by external sources that are not real. So let's become real. Let's start moving forward into the path of light. Let's move forward into our true self, because in the end, we're going to show you the way to come back into yourself so that you can connect with your divine self and hear your own divine inspiration and your connection to the universe or source or God, whatever you might want to call it. But it's within you. And step one is letting go of who you thought you were.